welcome to discussions of music, healing, and consciousness with your hosts, Chris Noble and Bill Perotzman. On this podcast, Chris and I offer a spontaneous, ongoing conversation about how music is intertwined with healing and consciousness. Our first season helped lay the foundation and build some of the superstructure for what we want to do here in Season 2, where we'll be welcoming some intriguing guests, going deeper into ancient mysteries and wisdom, and cultivating your background knowledge and curiosity. We hope these discussions will inspire your own study and practice of the musical and healing arts, and that your contribution to advancing world consciousness will be satisfying for you and transformative to those around you. Let's get started.
We make this episode about bringing as much healing energy to our listeners and our audience as possible, because healing can totally come in a frequency vibrational way, and just us talking about what we love and just broadcasting our frequency as woo-woo as that can sound to some people, there's science to back that up, and beyond that, it's a feeling. I mean, I just people appreciate. Everyone can understand when they meet people that they like. They say, "I like that person's vibe,"
Right?
Vibration.
I like it. Let's do the healing thing. I've got something to share about phonons, which is, I don't know why they came back to me. Well, no, I know exactly why they came back to me, because I mentioned it when it was new in a podcast that I listened to, or that finally dropped or something. So, let's do the healing, because the world needs healing, right? Doesn't it? It always does, but
it feels like now it's a little more pronounced.
It's more pronounced, but to be honest here, so we're not going to heal the world in one podcast, but we might be able to heal one or two people, who then reach out and heal one or two more people, and start the ripple this way. So here we are, dude. Heal me.
Yeah, well, even that right off the bat, right? It's like, well, no one can heal other people in a way. We all just basically allow the other person to heal themselves more than anything. But of course, that does come from us putting an intention out there to make that connection happen. So
say that again, because this is like really key, I think.
It all comes back to the self. Sorry.
To the self. No, you're right. I just wanted to make really like fortissimo on this, right? Because it's not about, and I'm saying this with great respect. Surgeons do amazing work. So there are some things that we need to get experts involved in. But what we're talking about right now is a healing that takes place within each of us. And nobody is going to reach into my heart and fix it. I have to do that work. But other people can invite you to do that work. They invite me to do that work. So Chris, invite us to do the self work that we must do to heal.
Well, it's empowering, right? I mean, that's the end of the day. It's to empower everyone else to find that you are your own surgeon, you are your own doctor, you are your own guru, you are your own coach. That is ultimately the power. At the end of the day, all resides within you, the individual. And then Bill and myself are literally reflections of your own inner consciousness. And, it's basically always comes back to you. So when we say, we want to heal people or heal the world, it's also, we may as well say we want to heal ourselves, because, I would say for me, the last couple of weeks have also been, my friend used a really great analogy. She's like, don't tell me how you feel. Tell me what kind of weather you're experiencing internally. And I'm like,
right. Yes, that's awesome. Right.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
And so this is what we did yesterday at our small, we had like 6-7 people at this breathwork music journey event here in Vancouver. And we got everyone to share what their internal weather was. So, audience, like, just check in for a moment. What's your internal weather while you're listening or watching this? And it's kind of fun. So, I described yesterday, I was like, well, actually my internal weather is similar to the weather we were having outside in the world yesterday, which was a mix of sun and cloud. There's these patches of beautiful bright light and blue sky, and then there's these really thick dark clouds, and they're all mixing around. And I'm like, that's exactly how I've been feeling the last couple of weeks. Is there's just a whole kaleidoscope of pretty interesting emotions, and they're all light and dark and everything in between. And I thought that was a cool analogy right off the bat, to help. I think sometimes the English language can be really limiting. And so when we're playing this role of, okay, well, again, you are your own healer. So you can check in with yourself and just ask yourself right off the bat, what kind of weather are you experiencing right now? What does your forecast look like internally? And that can sometimes, even just saying that can be like, yeah, wait, it is a storm. I feel like I'm going through like a thunderstorm, but I also feel like the storm's a little further now in the distance and I can see it, but I'm not in it. These are great ways to describe how we feel. So I think that's right off the bat. This is a great way that people can start to almost self-diagnose
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
way using this weather analogy, because it takes language and all the categorization and all the kind of, I don't know, it's tough to put spiritual, energetic, non-physical ideas into the English language. It's very limited in that way. So
We
use
have
the
to
weather.
use weather. Anything that's an analogy for what's happening, or maybe a better a weather metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking about this. There's so many other things you could use too. Like if you're a chef, maybe a
Yes.
cooking metaphor makes sense. What is it that you're cooking up today?
If you're a mechanic or you love cars and vehicles, how's your vehicle feeling today? Is there a little rusty rumble in the engine right now, or is it running smoothly? How do you feel?
Or coders. I mean, if you're into the creative world of coding, are you working on something that's completely boring right now? That's just rote, repetitive stuff? Or are you like pushing the limits of AI, some new algorithm you're putting together?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean that's a great way to start. And then you can get into so many avenues. And this is another thing too. I was having a really lovely chat with my friend after this event yesterday. We had a great debrief and we were sharing ideas for future events. And in our conversation, we kept like mentioning new practices and new things that both of us had encountered that the other hadn't heard of. And we were like, oh, that's a cool thing. Oh, that's a cool thing. And once again, we're just blessed these in this day and age with this thing called the internet and pretty much infinite knowledge at our fingertips. And then that's the next thing is then, as your own personal guru, as your own personal coach, you can start to now look at all of these things. We got breath work, meditation, yoga, qigong, a billion other things in there. Forms of healing that you can really dive into that are accessible. Like I don't even like random things that I've been seeing more about, like reflexology, different traditional Chinese medicine modalities, or you can get into, it is, again, this is a fun rabbit hole to go down. So then that's where we can start to look like, what are the modalities that you like? What are the things that gravitate? Because I might have all the things that I love and I could list them all off, but just our listener viewer watching or listening right now, you might not resonate with those. So it's, again, empowering you to go out there and see like, what are the things, and of course on this podcast, we're likely going to suggest start with some sound and music, because that also goes with all the other things. And that's the nice thing you can start to look into as well. And I don't know, Bill, like when you're doing any of your practices, meditation, whatever, when and how do you like to incorporate sound and music? Because I don't think I've actually asked you that, and I'd be curious to.
Gosh, So, you were talking, and I was thinking about a topic I want to cover in a bit. But the really cool thing about being a musician is that so much music is inside you already. A lot of people who listen widely have a lot of that too. But like our job, Chris, me, our job is to have music in us, ready to go. Drop the hat, we can make it happen. And a lot of that music is memorized. But, memorizing music is deeper than that, because you not only memorize the notes and how the muscle memory has to go to make them happen. And if you're a wind instrument or something else, you have your muscle memory of your mouth, your embouchure works. If you're a drummer, there's a lot all those things get memorized too. And then you also memorize the emotional content of the music. Because, if you don't have the emotions down, it's going to sound dry and flat when you reproduce it. This works for improvisation too. You have to know that in the space, you're going to be ready to go. So there's that spiritual, inspirational level that just is over the cliff. It's time for the solo now. Right, here we go. So all of that is part of the memory. of this thing. And because of that memory, and because of what research has told us about music, when we remember any of that, like in the moment before the music starts, you're sitting there ready to go at the keyboard or whatever. In the moment before the music starts, you are fully present with all of the music that's going to happen in the next 10 minutes or whatever, 30 minutes. Like a hologram appears that is the music. And every part of the hologram, right, is representational of the whole hologram. You could reduce it down, you still see the hologram at the smallest level. So that's the kind of memory that musicians bring to that moment before the, 1, 2, 3, 4, bang, off we go, right? That moment right before it happens. So with that kind of presence, here's the point. Research tells us that works on us physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, works on us the same way as if we hear the sounds. So it's kind of like we don't have to wait for the sound, if we want to connect our need for healing with a particular music or a particular sound or particular frequency, whatever it is, that is available inside of us human beings instantly. Bang, it's there. You don't have to wait. You don't have to listen to the whole thing, right? The moment you're in it, you're in it. And there's a beautiful way that happens. We want to talk about that in a minute. So that's my moment of music. When it comes to me, Chris, it's like, okay, oh man, I need to let this stuff go here. So what am I going to use? And right away, it's like, okay, so David Hikes, hearing Solar Winds, bang, right in my place. And I'm hearing the incredible tube and throat singing stuff. It's just coming in and just like letting it all go. I can feel that right now. Like I'm feeling that right now. You guys all know this, a piece of music that makes your skin crawl. You get ASMR, with that, whatever that stands for. I can't remember right now. Something about the spine and a reflex. But that wonderful kind of skin tingling thing that happens. Think of a song that brings that to you. All you have to do is think of it, and you can prove the science that they found about this. So a long-winded answer, but is that getting you there?
Yeah, I mean, long-winded answers. That's why I love podcasts, right?
Yeah, right. Because you talk for all day. And by the way, we're trying to set a record with this one. So if you're all listening right now, have a meal, get a nice cup of coffee, put your feet up, and we'll see you in 3-4 hours.
Yeah. Well, that's how I love listening to podcasts, to be honest, though. All joking aside, I do love getting a good one on and just throw it up and having a nice listen, or sometimes going on a walk, and getting more active and just listening to that. I love podcasts for that. It's why I love doing this with you. And the whole process is so much fun. That's why we continue to do it.
Right.
Many years later, actually. Now it's been probably approaching 2 years, I think.
Oh yeah, we should probably start thinking about a season 3.
I think so.
But everybody out there listening to our operational conversation, they wanted to come here for healing, and they got
well, if I learned anything, Bill, it's healing can come from the funniest kind of places, though. Sometimes,
Oh, sure. Like not even intentionally. It just
exactly
it surprises you.
It's sometimes the silly conversations that we have, or other people I know when I'm listening to a similar thing on a podcast, as an example, and there's just this kind of tangent rambling and laughter and goofiness that comes on. I love that. Like that's another reason why I love podcasts, is because it's uncensored, unedited. Well, I mean, sometimes it's a little edited, but still it's pretty much a raw, open conversation. It's the whole point of a podcast.
Yep.
And I love that because of those little moments of non-scripted humanness. Basically, it's humans being humans. We're silly creatures, like the fact that we get taught to be an adult is kind of a crazy thing. I'm not saying we don't want to be responsible or look after one another.
Let's just stop being responsible. You've seen the world. Who wants responsibility for all of that?
Well, it's also a very good point. Can't blame you for that.
But I know what you mean.
But you know what I mean? It's like, obviously
totally.
there's elements of becoming a more mature, like just wise person that's important. But also, the fact that this whole, as a kid, I remember like my whole objective as a kid was just to grow up and become an adult. So I didn't
as fast as possible.
Anymore, because that's what I was conditioned. You're working your whole way to become this quote unquote adult, to get into the real world, quote unquote, whatever the heck that means. Right. Yeah. And you lose this element of play and the playfulness and just being silly and not taking life so seriously. Kids are the most expert people we can look at for how to play. they are expert players. They literally always look for the opportunity where to play, in any given situation, no matter how bleak or dark. I mean, I even at a funeral, as an example, you still sometimes see the kids running around and chasing each other and
exactly
having a great time while we're all bawling our eyes out. And that's okay. But it's like, look at how they're taking life. And remember, kids are that much more fresh from quote unquote source, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, where they're bringing that fresh, almost like cosmic, higher consciousness energy, and almost that reminder that as we get bogged down from physical reality and experience more and more traumas and all these things that just like program and create stories and beliefs in our mind of how we're supposed to quote unquote, whatever that means, then we start to lose that play. And so I'm very grateful. I live in an area where I have a park about a block away where it's a very family oriented neighborhood, and there's always daycares and kids after school and stuff running around playing, especially also with dogs too, and everyone walking their dogs. Same energy, same idea. They're just these examples of, look, I mean, one of the most healing things we can all do is add a little more laughter, add a little more levity and lightness into our lives, and just try to, I'm not saying to like, not to ignore what's happening in this world or stick our head in the ground. No, I'm not saying that. But in order for us to move through all this challenge, you think we're going to move through it by just focusing on only the negative? Or are we going to move through it with maybe a little bit of laughter? As nuts as that sounds, it's not to be discriminatory towards the suffering, but it's to also bring that humanity back, where it's like we have to be able to laugh at the craziness, because that's what keeps us sane. And I think that's what's going to give us the strength to continue to move forward, because it gives you hope. It gives you that light to like, why are we even bothering?
If we can play together, we've got it, right?
I think that, I mean, look at kids in the park when you got all walks of life. They have not learned all the categorization that we teach, where, oh, that person's a this person or a that person or from this thing or from that place, or none of that matters to these kids. They're like, you want to play? Cool. Great. Let's go. Done. There's no thought. It's just like, you're a beautiful being. You're here. Do you want to play catch? I don't know.
Let's figure it out. Yeah.
And I felt that recently walking by, it's like a very Canadian moment here, but I was walking by the park and I saw these guys playing hockey, and I was just like, and I was busy. I was on the phone. I wasn't able to make the interaction, but I was walking by, and this like inner child part of me was like, hey guys, can I play?
Yeah.
I just wanted to go. And you're just like, that child comes out of you and you're like, hey, just like, I don't know, a bunch of strangers. I just wanted to play with them though. So I think that's a big thing that we need to still remember is, I know it's tough during these challenging times, but can you bring a little bit more laughter, a little bit more play, lightness into your life?
I was on a call a little bit ago with a PhD psychologist who's a mover and shaker in the world of emotional intelligence, just a bunch of other things. I mean, he's all that, right? And we were just talking, he was talking about what he's got going on. And it was like we were kids on a playground. I mean, he was so lit up with what he was doing. And the native totem of the coyote came up. The coyote, the trickster and stuff. But he's been working a lot with native peoples up in Canada, and they identified that archetype in him. The playful trickster, non-gender specific, kind of, what would you call it? Like a shamanic influence to open up to something fun and healing and innovative, and just all of that. That invitation, just really powerful there. And it was such a blast to watch that on my friend's face, right? To see that happening in real time.
It's an archetype, I believe, right?
Yeah, it is. It's an archetype.
Those archetypes.
Yeah, I have somewhere here, I have an oracle deck, one of those card decks that has animals in it. And the coyote is present in that, of course, along with others. But it was wonderful to see that energy. And here's a guy who's come through his entire career, just very intense career now, like pivoting around play.
Wow.
Right. And thanks to First Nations, First Peoples, who are offering that invitation to play in a new way, right?
Right.
Way.
And that's like, it's an ancient practice.
Ancient.
It's so funny that, especially not right now. I mean, we are really falling back in a great way into these teachings, and we're kind of revitalizing them, and sometimes putting a little modern twist, which I think is beautiful and needed. Because these ancient practices are, well, they've lasted the test of time for a reason, and it's also cross cultural. It's also cross planetary. I mean, it's all over the globe. We find so many similar teachings with their own unique variations,
Right.
certainly, and unique language to it, but the same principles being taught
Culturally appropriate.
Yeah, yeah, and that's amazing. So again, like, that's another resource we all have, is to look at the first peoples of our geographic area, wherever that is, and what are they talking about? What are they teaching? And maybe what resources are they potentially offering? Is a great way to start. And then at the end of the day, like I said before, the internet, like,
Right.
we can look at these teachings in a general sense. And again, when there's some that resonate and just pop out, like, those are the things that you might want to explore more of. And why not? Maybe, we had some amazing, my friend brought her drum, which, in a lot of First Nations or First Peoples community or cultures, they, building of a drum is a very sacred practice, right? There's a whole process, and it's beautiful, because you literally infuse your own spirit and into the spirit of this drum and the skin that you're using of the drum. And when she was playing it yesterday with my piano, oh my God, it was just so powerful, and it made me go, like, I need to get a drum. Like, I need to do that. So that's like one of the many, next steps I want to take in my healing journey, is getting more, as a musician, especially. I'm like, I've never built one of my own instruments. I've never.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. As keyboardists, we don't really get that invitation often.
No.
So hey, let's go build a piano.
How cool would that be to build your own instrument? Right. So I'm like, that's the kind of stuff I want to look more into.
Truly. I know there are instruments, like fundamental instruments. The banjo is something you can build. Guitars, you can buy kits. I don't think there are any drum kits. There probably are, but to build the kind of drum you're talking about, like the native drum, find somebody who can teach that, right? Isn't there there must be people.
Oh, well, I mean, here in Vancouver, there definitely are, in the surrounding area, because my friend was working with a First Nations community around this area with an individual who teaches that, and it was a whole workshop, and it was beautiful. And I have a couple of other friends who have done that too. So there's a good community for that here in British Columbia, and I'm sure West Coast US or who knows. I mean,
who knows? I know who to ask.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
And you know what? Well, I'll do a plug for that and put it in. Christine Stevens, Dr. Christine Stevens, is a drum circle facilitator. She's a music therapist, but she's known worldwide, and my wife and I are fortunate to have had drum circle certification, like facilitator certification, with her. But if anybody would know, it'd be Christine, because she has all these amazing drums that she's collected for years.
And just for a moment, Bill, I'm like, you're just reminding me, like, the power of drumming just right off the bat. So another thing I'm looking to build for the New Year is I want to make a course of how to unlock your inner musician, essentially. And I find a lot of these courses I'm kind of dreaming up right now, or they start with how to unlock blank.
Right. Yeah. Fill in blanks.
And this one's definitely going to be geared for non-musicians. And because I believe every human being is musical. Obviously, we're born with a voice, for first and foremost, which is a amazing musical device. And I want to open up and invite non-musicians to express themselves musically in like a matter of literally seconds. I don't want this. And drumming is probably one of the best ways to start that process, because you don't have to worry about melody and harmony. And right off the bat, if you're just focusing on rhythm, there's so much right there. There's so much, and anyone can pick up a drum and start banging a tune.
put a tune you like in your headphones, and then just start banging on the desk with your hands. Not hard. Please don't hurt your hands, but
use it by fingers sometimes, little drumsticks or whatever.
Right. And if you're into it, like, grab some sticks. It's not easy to go into Guitar Center anymore, but if you've got a place near you that sells musical stuff and can find a tambourine, or whatever, order it online.
Yeah, Facebook Marketplace too. Like, I love buying. Not that I'm at all a fan of Zuckerberg or a lot of the things that Facebook does, but I will, again, like with life, it's never black or white, and one of the positives I have to admit with Facebook, I do love the marketplace. I've got a lot of gear there before, and
Yeah.
as well as I like meeting the people that I usually buy from. I always end up having a really lovely conversation with them, and it's a nice experience. It kind of brings us back to, again, these more older times when the real marketplace was exactly like that. And
Yes, it was us.
these bonds where like we all need things and we can all work together to get rid of and take and share and all that kind of stuff and trade, and that's basic human nature at its best. And that's another great way you could find some cheap, very affordable instruments, sometimes free too. They give them away for free on Marketplace a lot.
Oh yeah, I've seen whole pianos for free as long as you can move them. Right, they just need it
and that's
gone.
that's the thing, right? You gotta. It's the paying for the move is.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's not so bad, So. So that's a great thing. That's a great way to start, is with percussion. And the thing with percussion too is to take it further. Is one of the many reasons why it's so healing is because of that frequency, that pulsation that the drum can make. I find, especially for the times that we're in right now, where we're moving through a lot of very dense emotions like anger, frustration, rage, sadness, depression, and all these things. Drums are very primal and very almost aggressive. And I mean that in a positive way, where it's like aggressive healing. You're like,
Yeah.
You kind of need to match that energy. And sometimes just sitting in a very peaceful meditation is not going to help, especially with anger. And I know we've talked about this in other podcasts, but drumming, I remember as a teenager, like I had a drum kit, a real beater crap kit, but it didn't matter. I came home from high school usually not too happy, and I was just like, bam, 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 bam.
Yeah, just
Yep.
This guy in our neighborhood down the street every day, a little after 3:30. He's in it.
Teenage angst, It's great to get it out on the drum kit.
Okay, so this is relevant, but kind of long. Have you heard about the longitudinal study of IQ, where they took kids in kindergarten and they followed them for like 40 years?
No.
Yes, I wish I had a citation for this. I'll have to find it. Maybe I can find it, post it in the show notes. But so they got kids in kindergarten to do an IQ test. And the idea was that these researchers were going to follow these kids as they became teenagers and adults, young adults, and stay with them, for, I don't know, until they were in their 40s. So they did this. And what they found was that in kindergarten, some amazingly high percentage of the kids had genius level IQ. It was like more than 70%. They were all, geniuses. They followed them along, and over time, the percentage of kids that still had high IQs diminished until the end of the study, like years later, something like 2% of them still had genius level IQ. All the rest of them went through the same school, same thing, whatever. And the study didn't say this, but I wonder if IQ is related to play.
Oh, yeah.
And the less we play, the lower our IQ score. But hey, musicians, right, are always supposed to be good at math. And if you believe the Mozart effect, at other things too, so there's a supportive thing about listening to music that helps with intelligence.
Definitely.
Well, what if you're spending your entire life playing, as musicians do? And by the way, no disrespect to anybody in the arts, but you don't play the paint. You don't play the sculpture.
Yeah, like there's an element of play, I would say, with
there is, but you have to explain it. You play the piano, that's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
You play the harp. No offense to any harpists, play the accordion. But you don't, play the clay. You play with clay.
Yeah.
And I think that mindset, that fundamental thing about what we do, Chris, is just like built into us. But,
yeah.
Even video games are not, well, they're fun. They're not play, really. Board games, especially Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of stuff, there's more play involved in that.
I would, the one thing with video games, and this is where it's so funny you mentioned this, Bill. I recently just went on Facebook Marketplace and bought myself my old system that broke a couple of years ago, a PS4. And I grew up with video games, and my cousin works in the video game industry. I've done some music for video games, and I think it's like any of the art forms, is there is, especially in the mainstream with video games. Yeah, I would agree. Not, especially with like, Modern Warfare and like these very, very violent games that are literally trying to program future soldiers, and it's just like no, that I'm like, yeah, no, I don't love that at all. And there are beautiful games that have been made.
Oh my gosh.
and
I was
like,
a Myst advocate and Riven, those
yeah,
immersive, figure it out kind
there's
of
a
thing.
beautiful. I just told a friend of mine who was complaining about like an ex-boyfriend getting lost into video games, and that's a whole other story, because I said, like, I don't really think it's the video games personally. I think it's addiction. It's
Yeah.
either you're addicted to alcohol, whatever, porn, or literally anything, right? It's like the addiction is the issue, not the video game, not the
Yeah.
substance per se.
Yeah.
Even though, anyway, that's a whole other conversation. And I was just saying, like, look, there's also video games there's one that I love called Abzu. It's a meditation game, and it literally takes you through the spiritual awakening process, but through a metaphor, and it's all underwater, and your whole character, all that you're doing is swimming through these beautiful, fantastical underwater environments. And you go through basically a spiritual awakening journey where you go into these dark, shadow areas, and then move through and take the whales will take you to this light area, and then you come to the surface and you're awakened. And it's a short game, but it's beautiful, and there's little parts you can find throughout these levels where you literally have your character sit and meditate, and there's beautiful music, and you can, as the game player, sit and meditate with your character.
Nice.
So it's like, and I played a wicked game a couple of years ago that was this music game where, as you jump through the level, every little thing and item that you hit adds a melody to the song. So as you progress through the level, you create this awesome piece of music as you're playing. And so it's like, there's these really cool exceptions, I would say, in the video game realm where you can really have quite a playful healing experience.
Okay, I'm with you on that.
That's where it's like exciting right now. There's so many healing opportunities in things that I think a lot of people probably wouldn't even expect.
But I'm gonna make a case for the organic stuff.
Please.
Could you have the same game with two people playing it together, but without the technology? And which one do you think would have the better effect?
I'll tell you another thing. So I like this. We're kind of playing like little devil's advocate here.
Like D&D is what I'm thinking of.
I love, and then D&D is great. My friends growing up were obsessed with that. I never fully got into it like they did, but it's fun. It's like it's really like make believe in every sense, right?
Yeah, completely, right?
Imagination, and it's performance. It's almost like your inner actor really comes out with it, which is awesome. And my favorite way of playing video games with other people, and this is why I've never gravitated towards online gaming, is I always love it in person. So
two players, hammering away at Mario Kart
in the same room.
In the same room.
That's the thing. It's like multiplayer, but in the same physical space.
Yeah.
Yes, you can get some of that online, but it's
not the
same. That's where I'm always going to come back. It's the same with online events. You wanted to do an online concert. That's cool. You can do some cool stuff with that, but it's nothing like seeing a concert in real life. There's no comparison. And I would say it's the same with video games. So I think you could have a similar experience, but it has to be in person with the video situation in the same space.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, because the one to machine experience of a game so much different than the two in the same room experience of the same game if it's a multiplayer, right? So I'm completely with you on that, and that's that interaction, the human interaction.
Yes, don't lose that.
Yeah, that's where play happens.
Yes,
in my definition. I mean, I've played way too many video games, and I love doing that. Possible? Yeah, right. How is it possible? But it's not the same. And I think you've hit the nail on the head, Chris. That shared experience is probably the gold standard for gaming.
Yeah,
and
it's like it's therapy. I remember when I was living in Toronto, I guess now like 3.5 years ago, and then my whole life back then, I found one of my go-to forms of therapy throughout my entire adult life. Essentially, was always going to my friend's place, from my friend from childhood, and usually having another friend or two join, and we would all play, a video game, whatever that might be, a sports game or whatever multiplayer game, all together. We're all sitting on the same couch, eating whatever junk food at the time, probably
Yep.
eating,
Yep.
snacking, smoking some weed, just having a good time. Maybe a beer or two, but we're more of a weed kind of cannabis crew, and we just would be laughing our butts off the whole time. And I would come out of those being like, well, I know we were playing games, but I think the games also were the invitation to just let loose, have
Yeah.
a good time,
Safe
laugh
space.
with your friends, have that connection. I think for a lot of men especially, I think women too, but I think with men specifically, men need like an activity when they hang out,
Hmm.
And for me and my friends, a lot of the time that was video games. And so I'm grateful for video games just because of all the laughter that has brought me, with just screaming at each other in the game or
Right.
whatever. You're
Right.
just hysterically laughing. And I remember almost every time without fail, I leave with like an additional six pack, like
Yep.
you're just gut wrenching laughter. It's the
Yep.
best.
No, I'm completely with you on this. It's it's a different world than where we used to be able to just go out and raise hell in the back 40, but the same idea. And that's the thing that we need to get back to somehow, or to retain. Many of us are in that place, but we want to be there more.
I think people are craving it more than ever now.
Totally. Well, your experience at festivals over the summer, I mean, people want to be in that space and be invited into a safe way to just, let our hair down and play again.
And some of the best parts of the events, like the workshops and stuff that I'm doing right now, is when everyone shares the beginning and at the end, because we always realize that we're all experiencing the same thing, different details, same general emotions,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's sometimes some of the most healing things, is just to hear that you're not alone, and you never are. Like we're all going through our own awakening process and in different ways, but it's ultimately the human experience that we're all experiencing, and that's a roller coaster ride. And I think we can all kind of bond over the craziness of it all, and when we kind of just feel that community of like, yeah, it's a crazy ride out there, living on planet Earth as a human being right now. It's a little, it's nuts, but it's also like, this is part of the adventure that we signed up for. And when you're with other people in that play, in that camaraderie that you have through that, it makes it all worthwhile, I think.
There's a surefire way to get me to laugh, and that's put me on a roller coaster.
I
It's just, you
love roller
can't,
coasters.
you scream your head off, and
Right?
you've got the rise and the fall of the thing, the weightlessness. If there's a loop, it's just such an incredible ride. And
It's
as a
yeah.
metaphor, it works out okay too, because if you think about all the crazy as more of a roller coaster ride, just that tiny little shift can help.
Yeah, you're hitting it right on the head, Bill, because, well, let's be honest, life it is a game, and when you can approach it as a game, even, and then it's never to negate the suffering that's happening, because there's so much, but you, for me, I'll just say my personal experience and my current understanding is that this reality is a game, and every game has its challenges. It has to. It wouldn't be a game if it didn't have
Right.
that. And so you can either look at life from that victimhood mindset that everything is happening to you, or that you have, manifested this incredible, detailed virtual reality game. And when we can switch that perspective to playing your life, playing the game of life, that's where everything can start to become more playful and lighter, and you'll be amazed at how your outer world will start to reflect that more, even with the chaos that is completely out of our control.
Oh yeah. The only place that it stops is at neutral.
Yeah.
The rest of the time it's all up and down, and acceleration and deacceleration and all of that is all part of it. And when you need a rest, come to
Yeah.
rest.
Yeah.
And
The rest is important.
it's so important, right? You can't sleep on a roller coaster. It doesn't matter how good your sleep doctor is or what meds you're on. The idea about sleep is that you stop,
Yeah.
yeah, and find a way to do that. Well, or find a way to play hard enough. It's hard to make a distinction between work and play as a musician
which
because
is
there's
great.
heavy lifting involved, but when it all comes down to it, it's still play. And very difficult to go over the same difficult passage, complicated trying to get the fingering down, or whatever.
Yeah.
That's work. But my sister, for example, is a piano teacher, has found a way to break that up where if somebody's trying to learn a accompaniment pattern, 5-finger accompaniment pattern in the left hand, she just lets them improvise whatever they want in the right hand. And if the right hand isn't cooperating, then they'll sing it. And because these are all kids who are like elementary school kids, they have no inhibitions. And just adding that little bit of play into an otherwise difficult and repetitive process turns the whole thing into play. And the muscle memory and everything comes along a lot faster that way. And I've never sung at my desk at work, but now that we have, headphones and the internet, I watched this change. In the 90s, people were starting to put on headphones and be in their music at their desk, regardless of what they were doing. It's marvelous to see that avenue is there for us. And who knows if they're listening to podcasts or music, doesn't matter. The tricking the brain out of its malaise and opening it up to something better is the purpose of the drum, right? The purpose of the podcast, purpose of the symphony or whatever the music is in the room.
Yeah, and it's amazing how I actually, when you read that study with the kindergarten kids, following them through life and just watching their IQs plummet, which is, again, I fully can believe and understand that that's absolutely happening on a much bigger level.
Yeah.
And I know
it's institutionalized, unfortunately,
Yeah,
our education system is just dumbing us down.
It is in almost every single possible way, and I know it's shifting a little bit, but it's microscopic shifts. We need a complete, revamp of that, and that's a whole other podcast. But it is interesting to see that, because the nice way to nip that in the butt, if you're listening and watching this right now and feeling a little despair of like, oh well, geez, like kindergarten was a little while ago, and
it's been
how much my IQ's plummeted since then, and blah blah blah. Well, good news is you can get it back, and lots and lots and lots of ways to enhance your mental cognition, to enhance your brain. And well, one of the best ways is to start playing music. It's a great, learn an instrument,
pick up a drum.
For me, pick up a drum or a harmonica if you want to get into the melodics, or a handpan or a hang drum. These things that are all open tuning, great ways to start. And just feel how your brain, it's going to start to do, you can feel like it's doing bench presses, and that's new neural pathways. That's your brain going like, yes, all right, here we go, IQ, you're coming back, baby.
Yeah.
It's like the
Fortunately, gym. We have this neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
I remember not too long ago how people were talking about, irreversible damage to brain cells. And then science came along and said, well, it's not really that it's irreversible, because even where there's been a lobotomy, the brain figures out how to wire around that. And that's fascinating to me. It's like, we can't stop this thing.
Isn't that Joe Dispenza's story, I think, of healing like paralysis, essentially? Like, once again, and this is another whole podcast, but I can't stand now when doctors are like, you have this amount to live, or you are going to be crippled for the rest of your life. You're like, first of all, just like, we know the placebo effect is a real thing. So if you're telling, especially that most people, maybe less nowadays, and over the last couple of years, we've lost some trust, certainly, but I would say still most people believe everything that their doctor's saying. And so the doctor has almost like a godly position, and they bring you into this existence, for one. So like the white coat doctor image is this, it's an archetype, and it's something that's ingrained into our psyche as like this very, well, if the doctor says it, it's got to be, the truth, the reality. And there's nothing else that could possibly exist. And of course, we know that all the people that have defied all of those, doctors' proclamations of, okay, well, you have 2 months to live, and then the patient's like, no, F that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna find some alternative remedies and yada yada, and then they beat cancer, or they beat whatever situation, terminal illness, and then they maybe write a book about it and start teaching it, because It's amazing. Like
It is.
it all comes back to the power of the human being, like comes back to you, the listener viewer. You have all that in you. And the funniest thing about medicine, and modern medicine especially, is that it's like it's forgetting, is putting it nicely, forgetting that we are the medicine. The human being is the medicine. It's not this external pill that we take. It's the mind, it's the perspective. We are literally capable of healing anything.
This is why I love Eastern medicine so much, because it's all about getting the human organism to heal itself. How can we encourage the human organism's abilities, to heal itself? If we could figure out how to encourage the human organism's abilities to make beautiful music, that would change so much, right? And another podcast, right? But Jacob Collier doing his sing along stuff, and
Yes.
like organized sing alongs. Everybody sings along at concerts, but to actually encourage people to do something directed with it, and that's the discipline of a musical instrument. Is it's not just being in the space as the music happens. It's becoming a part of the space, becoming a part of of the sound in the room, and that changes everything.
Well,
That's
it's beautiful, right? Like that's, you
yeah,
become the music. And like
yeah.
what I forget who I was, some ancient guru of some kind. I forget who was saying this, but basically,
It's
it
one of
doesn't really
those.
matter. I was talking to my friend yesterday. She's like when she does her workshop, she's like, I've stopped name dropping all the quotes and all the amazing wise words of all these amazing people. It's not, no disrespect to them. It's more just that it's the message that matters more than who said it at the end of the
Right.
day. And no disrespect. Half the time it's just because I can't remember. But anyway, so
Well, there are a lot of them, right?
and there are a lot of them. There's so many
And hey,
teachings.
if you're living it, people are going to pick it up. Doesn't matter who said it first.
Exactly, and so it's all shared consciousness and everything.
Right. Unity consciousness, right?
Exactly.
Like,
So,
everybody's welcome. All you got to do is just change your mind.
yeah, my idea is your idea is everybody's idea. So, with that being said, so really, what was it trying to basically the quote was that to truly, they're kind of talking about the spiritual awakening and the quote unquote enlightenment process, and they're like, really, to their definition of enlightenment was, you really can't understand anything in this reality until you become that thing. And that might sound crazy, but they're like, to really understand nature, you need to become the blades of grass. You need to become the water in the river. You need to become the birds in the trees. And that might sound very poetic and abstract to a lot of people. But I know in my deep states of meditation, or even walking through nature and feeling unbelievably connected all of a sudden, and or with plant medicine as well, all of the above, I've felt that where I really all of a sudden like morph with the water, and you have these moments of connection, let's say, and understanding. And in those moments, it's, again, English is challenging to articulate it, but you feel that almost godly, universal consciousness and connection that I'm like, yeah, I am the water. I am the wind. I am the trees. And those feelings are like the definition of euphoric bliss, basically.
Right there.
Right there. Because that's the place we all go back to anyway, is that singularity, sense of connection to everything, all things, everything in existence. And Bill, this is a side note, but I was at the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned not photons. What was it?
Phonons.
Phonons. What was that again?
Wow. Okay. So
I know it's random.
completely different topic, but I'm into like quantum mechanics and stuff, and read about such things. And so whenever somebody says quantum, I always wonder. And I saw this thing, and it's been a couple of years, I guess, but I was reminded to go back to it. A photon is a quantum quasi-particle, basically, and we all know about them because they're light, right?
Yeah.
And they're the fundamental sort of building blocks of everything. So there's also phonons, and phonons are, to think of it this way, they're the glue between sound waves, but they're a quasi-particle. And the most amazing thing about phonons is that they have mass. but it's negative mass. So instead of falling down in gravity, they fall up.
What? I love that.
So here we have this thing that is actually what glues sound waves together, that is more representative of the way a crystalline lattice is held together than the way that a sound wave looks.
Interesting.
So there's this mind shift that's happening here. And what I like to think of it as a sound wave is kind of where we've been, but sound seems to be more like a weave than a wave. Because ultimately it's held together in a more holographic way
Right.
than in a compression release kind of way. And
it's like a higher dimensional understanding.
A higher dimensional understanding, right? And that is really cool, but it does tie into that thing back at the beginning. So when you remember music, its effect is instant. And I wonder if that's sort of like jacking into the quantum entanglement of the energy in that song or whatever it is, right? It's like plugging directly into the hologram that is sound, or that is music, organized sound. But here's the thing that blows me away too, is that jacking into just one frequency isn't possible. You cannot admit the existence of a phonon in isolation from all the other phonons that are connecting all the other sound waves that are, it just goes on and on and on, right? So it's not some particular frequency anymore. It's a connection to the weave of all sound, organized or not, right?
Mm.
And I don't know, this came up somehow in, I guess, watching a thing on the sounds of the universe, the sounds of the different planets, and they're very disorganized. A lot of the time it's not even regular noise. It's kind of disorganized noise. And the ability to turn that noise into something congruent that speaks and has a message, and that evokes emotions and then invites spirituality and all of that. As beautiful as all those sounds are, if all the sounds go away and all you remember is the structure or the thing or the whatever, it just like all hits you at once in that moment that you remember the music before you put your hands on the keyboard and play it. I wonder if that's some sort of phonon-based entanglement that brings it all in. Who knows, thought. Right?
It's also funny because it's like this is humans grappling with the ineffable a lot of the time, right?
Right. Yes. Like this one is way out there in the realm of effable.
Right. And so it's beautiful though. I think it's really that's the kind of research I love hearing in the scientific world, because obviously it continues to come closer and closer to spirituality and spiritual science, and
right.
They start to meld together and become the same thing ultimately, which is what the ancients had zero difference between science and spirituality. They were the same thing. It's just understanding reality, really. That's all it is. But then
even with that, they still built these very pure resonating chambers, like in the Great Pyramids.
Yeah.
These incredibly acoustically live environments to get it as close to perfect as they could, right? I could see them striving to make the dimensions and to have it be the purest possible sound chamber.
Yeah.
To get there.
They're using sound for a lot of things. Like we were talking about just the healing properties of sound, which are incredible. And that definitely, absolutely from personal experience is a thing. These places absolutely will bring healing, but they also do a lot of other things. And they certainly, especially when sound is built with geometry.
Yep.
And you get sacred architecture, sacred geometry mixing with sound and acoustics. These are the devices or almost machines that the ancients built to enhance consciousness, also to almost build like a spiritual highway for your consciousness to supposedly travel the cosmos. This is one of the many functions of the Great Pyramid and other ancient architectural buildings, essentially. But even calling them a building, I don't think is doing it justice, because the way they worked was everything was multi-purpose and multi-dimensional. And I've heard some really interesting theories about the Great Pyramid also being built on a higher dimension. So what we see of the physical third dimension pyramid is the obvious pyramidal shape. But then apparently in higher dimensions, it's inverse. There's an inverse pyramid creating a
right, that shape that has four sides. It's a mirrored, like a pyramid stacked on top of a upside down pyramid.
Yeah, and it creates that star pattern. That I'm blanking on right now. But it's,
I was going to say it's a tetrahedron, but I don't think that's the right word.
I think it is a tetrahedron.
Is that right?
I believe so. Yeah. Don't quote me on that, audience listening, watching, but the name of that particular geometric shape, but it's a very, very powerful shape. It's what the ancients actually teach, that you make that shape and visualize that shape. Let's call it a tetrahedron. I'm pretty sure that is the term. You visualize that shape in meditation, and they say that that's actually how you can travel physically or astrally with your consciousness through meditation anywhere in the universe, to communicate, to view, to do whatever. And they really do use that shape specifically as a vehicle for your consciousness. And this is getting, a little abstract, but this is also just the untapped, unknown, amazing knowledge of, the non-physical, and how the ancients knew how to interact with it, whereas we're still kind of poking around in the dark a little bit right now.
That's an important shape in quantum gravity too, the tetrahedron, if that's in fact what it is. But it's only important because it's, like you said, it's the next dimension.
Yeah.
It's a mathematical way to bridge between 3D and whatever the next dimensional reality is, which they postulate it's 8D, E8 it's called. And the tetrahedron is the pivotal shape that gets there. It's itself a crystalline shape.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful shape. And that's another whole fascinating rabbit hole right there. Right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. We should try to get Clee Irwin or somebody who's in that field on as a guest, citizen scientist.
Yeah.
But he's funded a lot of this incredible research. And, I don't know, if you could go to Harvard and find people doing quantum gravity research the way that you can in Pasadena, but it's an interesting endeavor, and we went through string theory, and now we're on to quantum gravity and some other things, and the nature of at least implied reality that these mathematicians are doing. The work's incredible. Maybe I'll post a link to that in there too. It's about the simulation. Simulation theory is part of this too.
Well, the simulation theory is fascinating because it really does connect with a lot of ancient scripture and a lot of ancient texts, because they all talk about reality in that same way. And it's true. And it's not, when people talk about simulation or the holographic universe theory, sometimes it can feel a little dystopian, or, like, oh, we're trapped in this,
right, in this 3D,
which is a perspective, obviously, that has some validity in some way. But it's also like, again, I believe that we chose to be here, and this is the holographic game reality that we're in, but it is holographic, and it is the third dimensional, at least, reality that we find ourselves in, if that's indeed what this is. I don't know. It's always changing in my reality, I think. But if you look at that, this third dimensional reality as this holographic reality, it does start to actually, there's like science that starts to really confirm this. And I know that they've had I'm blanking on the name of the phenomenon in space, but they've actually, there's like a particle or phenomenon in space that they have measured. I heard this a while ago, so it's I can't quite remember, but basically the study or the actual theory was that they looked at a lot of the mathematics behind things that they saw in the cosmos, and they saw just observing space in general, and they found, I think it's called an Adinkra code, something like that. And basically, they realized that the way that this universe seems to materialize is the same algorithm that we use in our search engines for Google. It's like, what? So you're like, so hold on a second. You're telling me that the mathematics that we're seeing in the cosmos, and I forget specifically related to what that it was, but it was something that was being observed in the cosmos. And it was literally a mathematical algorithm that they were picking up and deciphering, and they realized it was the identical algorithm that we use for our search engines on planet Earth for our internet. And you're like, when those connections are being made mathematically, because a lot of the universal language, there's many universal languages in this universe. Music, I believe, is one of them, but another one is math. And at least in this third dimensional reality, we do all have, at least as far as we know, the same mathematics throughout the universe. Maybe they do. I think the physics likely shift a lot, planet to planet, probably. But math seems to be pretty universal. And who knows? I don't know if this is, I mean, we're always learning more about this stuff. So if math is the universal language and we're finding these similar algorithms being used way out into the cosmos, creating the fabric of space and time and everything, and we're seeing this in our own devices now and our own computers, you're like, it's clearly a simulation. Like this, the same math is being involved that we use in our simulation.
I would say the better word is objectification. I like the simulation idea because it allows for possibilities that are various. But I think you said earlier, and this is part of it too, like what the bill that you see may or may not be anything at all like the bill that someone else sees.
Right.
Right. So this perception, I'm not saying that this is anything at all like, what do they call it? Where the observer bias. Although,
right?
There is some of that involved. And then there's the whole fact, what do I show you, Chris, that I don't show somebody else? And so you might know me. Anyway, if we are in fact the objectification of some higher dimensional reality, we're probably okay here in 3D.
Yeah.
Some people that I know like to talk about us in the material world being a reflection of the spiritual world. And that kind of gets the idea across too. Like we're actually just a mirror of what really is, right? And it's an imperfect mirror. But it is in fact reflecting some other superior consciousness in some way. Is that close to what you're saying?
Well, yeah, and it's funny because all the dimensions too, when you kind of dissolve them together, they all blend into this one singular reality again. Right? So right? it's a constant paradox. This whole idea of dimensions, I look at it like a layer cake, but they're still all in the same cake.
Yeah, all part of the same cake.
And so third dimension, first dimension, I've heard first dimension is literally the same as source, actually. It's like back to the singularity.
Interesting.
And it's not actually this, like we look at, again, because of our human brains, we look, first dimension's blah.
Yeah.
Third dimension's where we are right now, but we need to go higher to the better dimensions. So what do you mean a better dimension? Like what does that even mean, right? And why do the ancients, like this is another fun thing about the ancients, like they would mimic their buildings on Earth to look exactly like the stars in the sky. They're bringing heaven to earth in that physical, literal sense. And there's so many reasons why they did that. But once again, it's like they recognized this whole sort of homogeneous, holographic, like they were physically trying to exactly replicate what was happening in the cosmos on Earth, because as above, so below, it's all the same. And when they can bring that, I guess, almost coherence together, there were some positive benefits, I guess, to that, and that's why they were striving to do that. Otherwise, why would they go to such great lengths to mimic the stars and the constellations and all that stuff, right?
And this reflection objectification thing, the method of healing is to intentionally embrace the real perfect stuff, because that changes the imperfect physical stuff. And I'm not alone on this. I read some other guy, David Hawkins.
Oh, yeah.
Levels of Consciousness guy. So this whole book on letting go, he basically describes this process and how, as his level of consciousness improved, he could let go of more and more stuff. Like he let go of the need for glasses. His eyes changed.
Wow.
Right? He talks about this stuff, and physical healings, miraculous things that we would go, what? He lived it. And there are others. Ram Dass is famously supposed to have been able to produce a Rolex watch out of thin air.
Really? I mean,
you hear these crazy stories, right? But the idea of manifestation is very much a part of that practice, and how anything that exists in reality can be objectified here in 3D at will, provided that you're plugged in, to the right thing. And why not, right?
Yeah, why not?
Why not, right? Bring it along. And if that's healing, it's much more than like asking for healing, doctor healing, or praying for healing, God heal me. Although there is a kind of an openness in the ask where you say, I don't know, I let this go, to use Hawkins' words, I don't know. Uh, it's the same I don't know that happens when you sit down and you don't know what your solo is going to sound like, right? I don't know. And here goes.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
And
that's
maybe
life, right?
that's totally life, right? And how do we stay at play with that? If we can figure that out, we can be healthy, healed in every way.
Great way to start. Start playing music.
Start playing music, right? That's the discipline that shows you how to be at one with play.
And I gotta say, like, not that this is across the board, because there's a lot of tortured souls that do become musicians and have challenging lives for sure, and they're probably not the healthiest at all. But I would say that outside of those individuals, music is a very healthy practice. Most of the time, my friends in the musical world that have stuck with it and really have made music a big part of their life, doesn't have to be the only thing they do. I mean, most of the time it's not. I don't just do music. You don't just do music either. We have other aspects of our lives, but it is a big part. And for my friends that have continued that, they look a lot younger. That's the one thing that I find immediately that jumps out to me, is there's a youthfulness that you get to really preserve, and through what? Play, right? Yeah. Playing. It makes you, if you feel younger, you look younger.
Play keeps you young.
Just from that alone, like if anyone's, having any kind of stress about aging, get an instrument going, start playing music, because it's one of the best ways you can stay youthful, I
had a guy in my class who was in his 90s, might have been 92.
Wow.
And he had one question like, Bill, what music should I use to keep me young? And I'm like, dude, you're 92 and you don't look like you're a day over 70. Wow. What are you thinking about this for? Right. So he had other tools too, but he'd come to music. He'd realized at one point somewhere along in the way, right, he'd realized exactly what you just said, is that music is so important.
It is
to youth, to keep your mind active.
Yeah.
Because I don't want my mind to atrophy. I want to stay active. What music should I use?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
That's great. So he's on a whole new voyage of exploration, in his early 90s. He was never into music
never
for that reason.
Right?
There you go.
Yeah.
So, stay tuned, because he's going to be, you'll see him as a concert violinist or some, shredding guitar solo, with some band. That'll be this guy.
I love that. And hey, like age is a concept. It's not
right.
a defined phenomenon. And that's another thing that science or the medical world just beats over our head. Like, at this age, you're supposed to experience this. And at this age, you're supposed to experience that. And of course, there's these experiments that have been done, and there's some still classified experiments that I have heard whistleblowers talk about from, like, the CIA as an example, that supposedly did a really interesting one where they brought individuals who were in their 80s, I believe, late 80s, 90s, to a place in the desert that they had recreated to look exactly like it did in the 1950s in their childhood, basically. And with this is still classified, so I can't verify if this is true, but there's other studies that do kind of verify this that I can't remember as clearly. So I'm just going to tell you the more classified one that I remember this whistleblower telling a documentary about. Anyway, and so they observed within the first month or two an immediate age reversal already, right off the bat. And by about 6 months in, they had knocked at least 10 to 20 years off of their quote unquote age in terms of not only what they looked like, but their mobility. Like, they were dancing again. So a lot of these people were wheelchair bound, and they were dancing, they were mobile, and because of their mind was like, I'm back in my childhood. This is the 1950s, even though they knew it wasn't that. Their mind, because everything around them, everything was recreated exactly like that time period. So it was very convincing. And it reversed their age. So once again, that proves age is literally a construct of the mind. Now, I think in this physical reality, we do have a phenomenon called time, and time does create a thing called birth and death that just exists in the time-based reality that we're in. So it's not to say that we don't ever die, but I do think that this cap on our life of 80 to 100 years I think that's BS personally, and I think
Yeah,
we can go much, much older.
I'm with
But
you on
also,
this.
if we look at the ancients, they have in the Egyptian kings list and the Sumerian kings list, and in the Bible and a lot of other ancient scriptures, they all talk about kings or or just average people that would live for hundreds of years, sometimes
Yeah,
thousands of years.
yeah.
So hey,
So hey, right? You want to get healthy, change your mind.
yeah, that's it.
The question is how you're going to change your mind most effectively and how that works for you. Like what fits your culture, you culturally, and uh, what are you ready to try? Like what is the
Yeah,
challenge in front of you that will help you change your mind?
yeah.
You know, the fastest. Take that road.
And let us
Don't do
know.
something dangerous, please. Don't. I mean, if the challenge is like using a wingsuit and you've never done that before,
Be careful.
work up to that, right? Work up to that. But there's so many things you can use to change your mind so profoundly, and uh, and your body will thank you for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's infinite. I mean, there's just so many examples. Recently, for myself, I've looked into water. I'm trying to really
Oh
clean up my
yeah, drinking the right water is
yeah.
so key.
Well, we're 70 something percent water, but I've heard some experts, some scientists that specialize in this talk about when you actually really dig into our molecules and even the muscle tissue and everything on a subatomic level, it's all kind of liquid. It's mostly all water. So we're actually, when you really break it down, we're technically more 98% water.
Yeah, like atoms. You know, most of it's empty space.
Yeah. And some sort of fluid thing, right? And
Yeah,
it's fluid, so it's got a water base to it. And our blood, what do you think blood is, right? It's water based with all the other things that are in it that I can't remember, and it's not my forte. But anyway, I've been changing up my water, and it's been a very positive effect. And at the very basic level, it just tastes so much better. So it's like growing a tomato in your backyard versus buying one at the grocery store,
truly.
and it's that's a whole other thing. So I mean, this is just a small example of all the things that you guys can do to change things up and to bring that I guess that next level of existence that you're probably looking for. And let us know in the comments. What are you finding that is helping you, and what are you finding that has been helping you to connect with that more spiritual side of life, and ultimately helps you with your own personal healing. Let us know.
Definitely. I have you noticed how um, the word spiritual has changed in the last few years? It used to be sort of, oh, we don't talk about spiritual, right? And now it's like, oh, well, that's like part of the spiritual world, right? It's become more acceptable and kind of a more inclusive term. It's not just reserved for you know, the crazy Bible thumping people anymore, or the weird gurus that crunch crystals. It's kind of becoming a little more mainstream.
Yeah, thank God.
And I love that awareness that we have in the world. That is healing right there,
Hmm.
of opening to something else, some other possibility that we didn't embrace before, or weren't curious about before.
Yeah, and it's true. I'll find it even like on a dating app as an example. Like I see more profiles that are just all about spirituality and
Yeah.
self improvement, and
Go,
they'll say,
yes, go us.
yeah, right. They'll be like, I'm looking for someone who puts their self development and spiritual practices as like a big part of their life. Like that's what I'm looking for right now in a partner. And
Yeah,
you didn't see that 10 years ago very
not at all.
often,
Mm-mm.
obviously. And so that it is true. It's a great sign that we're really we're waking up, and we're not just waking up, but we're like kind of waking into ourselves, our true selves, and not this just diluted version we've been conditioned to think and
Yeah.
kind of beaten over the head to think we're very limited. We're an accident, we're just this like kind of blip in the vastness of space and life, and we're an accident that's just like here and gone, and that's meaningless, and there's no point. It's like, no, that's quite obviously not the case.
Right. In spite of Hamlet.
Yeah.
So, we have to grapple with that and come to our own understanding. And yeah, go us, human beings in general.
Yeah.
It's feeling good, right now. It's
Yeah.
not the world I want if I could choose it, but what do I know? So I'm going to stay with the influence that I have, like one to one. like you and me, Chris, and with my family. It just like keep it small and authentic and playful, and let that change anything. What is that famous? I think it might be biblical, but it's about yeast. You put a tiny bit of yeast in the dough, and it changes the whole thing. And more yeast, please.
Well, and that's the effect. It only takes, we think it's this massive mountain to climb to change the world. It's actually just a small percentage of humans that are going to start to be, and we already are, talking about these things, teaching these things, implementing these things. And the ripple effect is so profound that it doesn't take that many to make it happen. And that's the encouraging thing. So everyone that's watching and listening to this is already probably on that frequency. And it only takes the small things. You don't have to be big. You just like keeping it, just as Bill said, like to yourself individually and your family and maybe your close friends. That's already so much right there. If we're all just taking that time to better ourselves and to come into love with ourselves, then that's it. Like we've already made a change. That's it. It's not actually as complicated as we might be led to believe, although I can understand why.
Yeah. So reclaim your IQ.
Yeah.
Be well.
Mm-hmm.
Make some music, and for heaven's sakes, play.
Yeah. Play.
There's our prescription.
Yeah. Your life is a sandbox. Go muck around in it and have some fun.
Yeah.
And play with your brother. Yeah. Play with your neighbors. We need to get back into community. I think that's another.
Right. There's another thing. Like community is everything.
Yeah.
I got a quote somewhere on that I found yesterday. I won't go into that now, but I found one and it was like, this is beautiful. So yeah, community. Yeah.
So let us know. Us. Yeah, go us. And everyone watching, listening, go you. You're great. You're amazing. And we hope that these positive vibes rippled out and shifted something in you. And if it didn't, that's fine too. Doesn't really matter. I had a great time making it.
Yeah, definitely.
So thanks again, Bill. I appreciate you. And this is always such a fun podcast. So
you're so welcome. Thank you, Chris. And hey, we'll do this again.
Let's do it again.
In a couple of weeks.
Sounds good. All right. Take care, everybody. Aho.
Aho.